Hi guys, this is Eric with Pixel Rookie, and this is the third episode of our story of New Raleigh 2.0. So far, New Raleigh 2.0 is growing slowly. On the first episode, the colony celebrated with a party after successfully fending off a group of raiders and gaining a new recruit. Last episode, Swarmlord was taken by the plague and was placed in the newly carved out crypt. This was the colony's first loss, but the Pixel Rookies had to keep moving forward. They just had some good luck come through and they were able to successfully recruit their captive. The only issue with the new member of the colony is that their food storage is still quite low. Hopefully that won't be a problem later on. We'll name our newly recruited member of New Raleigh 2.0 after Smonk, who made a very short appearance in our last Rimworld story. It's good to have you back, Smonk. They had another stroke of good luck. A group of huskies found their way into the valley and were self-tamed. This could be helpful for training them to haul objects to storage, and maybe they could even breed them for dogs to sell to visiting colonies. Things were beginning to look up again. That was until another group of raiders were preparing to attack New Raleigh 2.0. This was the largest and most armed raiding group they've encountered yet. They needed to prepare themselves with some additional defenses, and they lined up into their positions. Their defensive funnel into the base wasn't fully completed yet, but it was better than nothing. The raiders began their attack and the firefight started. Fravatar needed to get rid of his knife for a ranged weapon. He fell back to grab an SMG and returned to the fighting. Smonk went into the fray to defend the gunman. He held the line as long as he could, and after helping take a few raiders out, he was taken down too. Fortunately, the raiders suffered enough casualties that they started to flee. Fravatar began to chase down the raiders that were trying to escape. Hot Dog went in to rescue Smonk. Fravatar caught up to the raiders and engaged with one of them. The others continued to flee, and Fravatar made quick work of him. Another successful defense. The body count was high and more graves needed to be dug up to remove the corpses. Shortly after the fighting ended, their prisoner went berserk because of starvation. It looks like he was neglected because of the chaos that's been happening. He broke out of his cell, so Tao and Fravatar went to restrain him. After a quick brawl, the prisoner was incapacitated again, so Tao put him back into his cell. That night, an important research was completed and they were able to construct gun turrets for their defenses. 4 turrets were placed at the entrance of the base where the funnel was being constructed. This will really help fend off future raids. After surviving and growing New Raleigh 2.0 for an entire year, a toxic fallout hit the valley. This can be dangerous to the colonists if they're exposed to it for long term and they have no idea how long this fallout would last. This could get ugly. To combat this, they constructed a roof over the main entrance and restricted the colonists from leaving the base. They decided to put this time to good use and started expanding their base into the mountain until they were raided again. It was a small group, but they didn't want to take any chances. They lined up and the fighting began. During the fight, Hot Dog was building the power conduits to feed electricity to the auto turrets. The team easily dispatched one of the raiders and incapacitated the other. The final raider fled. Hoff put the new prisoner in their cell to try and recruit them into the colony. They were critically wounded, so Tao woke up and tended to them right away. Without even realizing it, they were almost completely out of food and the toxic fallout was still going on. This is not a good situation to be in. They'd run out of food before they would finish growing any more crops, so they had to quickly go out and hunt. Hoff would go out initially and bring some wild game back to the base. They could do this in shifts so nobody gets too much exposure from the toxic fallout. He brought in his kill, and it looked like another one died, so he collected it as well. They needed as much food as they can get right now. Fravatar decided to join him to speed this process up. They found the corpses of buffaloes outside, so they decided to collect them instead of killing more animals. Upon further inspection, most of these animal corpses were rotted from the toxicity. This means that all the animals had too much exposure to the fallout and aren't a viable food option. They received a message from a refugee being chased and seeking safety. Because of the dire food situation, they had to ignore the message and leave the refugee to fend for themselves. They couldn't afford another mouth to feed. It looked like most of the animals they hunted were rotted and their meat was no good. There was some food ready to be harvested though, so they had to go back out in the toxicity to gather some food supplies. They quickly realized that they needed to release the prisoners to fend for themselves. They can hardly feed their own men, they couldn't waste precious food on unnecessary mouths. They opened up the allowed area to outside of the base in order to have other members help farm. If Hoff and Fravatar did all the work, they'd receive too much exposure of the toxicity. Looking over them, they only had initial and maybe minor buildups at most. This is okay so far. While checking on the health of the colonists, Tao had a mental break from the pain he was experiencing. He slowly approached one of the new huskies, Lilith, and killed her. Now normally, everyone would be more upset at what they just witnessed, but they were almost completely out of food, and Tao did what might have been necessary anyways. Fravatar had the most exposure to the toxicity, and he wanted to avoid anything more than minor, so they established a new zone to keep him restricted to safe areas only. During the chaos of a fire from the thunderstorm, Tao slaughtered another one of their huskies, David. Tao finally seemed to snap out of his mental break at that point. After surveying the landscape, no wildlife was alive anywhere. Desperately trying to find more food, Smonk went out and was foraging all the berries that he could find to bring back into the base. On the 11th of April, the fallout finally passed only after 6 days. They were lucky it didn't last longer. That afternoon, wild deer started passing into the valley, which meant it was time to hunt. Not sparing any time, a hunting group of 4 men went out to kill the deer and stock up their food supplies. It took them all day to bring all the wild game to their freezer. A couple days later, they finished their defensive wall, leaving only one entrance into their base. This was a huge milestone for the longevity of New Raleigh 2.0. They also realized that it was time to increase their growing zones to make sure they have enough food to survive another event like the one they barely just got through. And this is where we'll leave off on this episode. If you enjoy watching this series and want to see more, feel free to subscribe and stay tuned to see what happens next with New Raleigh 2.0. Until next time, have a good one.